Hmm. What happened to Vako when the Orchestron failed?
Oh, you hear stories that can't substantiate, but there must have been people suing him and all kinds of things. I mean, why they didn't sue when the mean failure rate of polymodes was every 4 months? When the polymode came out, its mean time before failure was every 4 months. 4 months, that was the figure.
Hmm.
And even Dave, who designed it, it was a brilliant design. Used National Semiconductor chips of his design that had filters and amplifiers and a brilliant patented version of taking top octave synthesizers, bringing the notes down so that when you played it, it had a lot of motion. Beautiful sounding instrument, actually, and completely polyphonic, which nobody's synthesizer was. And yet he was pushing the edge of those chips a little bit too far. And the heat and a lot of other technical things, made it, as even Dave said, a piece of space junk, a beautiful instrument, but you couldn't take it on the road, basically. So one thing I'll say about Bob Moog had a genius for somehow finding his way through all three of these aspects, artistry, technology, industry, and instruments. I mean, the old Moog modular, that it wasn't a lie. The old story that there was a thunderstorm at Wembley Stadium and Keith Emerson's Moog was inundated with water, and they tumped it up and let it dry a couple of days and turned it on, and it worked. I mean, that's Bob to me. This kind of genius level, almost primitive at times, but kind of knowing, what was going to work and what would happen and stuff like that. Not many people have that. If I might draw a parallel, Hugh LeCain, again, a genius level man. I knew him. I liked him. He was suspicious of me because I was selling mini Moogs, and he really thought that what he had started out as an electronic sackbut was going to compete with a mini Moog. Well, nothing. It was insane even to think that. I mean, it was a prototype. There was one of it. It had weird, anomalous situations, nails hammered into a board and filed off to make the scale. I mean, things you couldn't possibly bring to the market. But Mr. LeCain never had to face the crucible of the marketplace. He was supported by the Canadian government. He did brilliant one-ofs. They would run up in Canadian electronic music studios. But I don't think there was any way he was ever going to be aligned from his own personal disposition toward the marketplace. And as Bob said, as the Moog Company became a multinational, multi-million-dollar corporation, which is certainly not how it started. Bob told me one day, he says, you start as a garage shop, you go to a multi-million, multinational. He says, somewhere along the way, you bypass either the competency or the interest of everybody that was in the garage shop. And I think to a certain extent that was true about the entire American synthesizer industry. The Moog Company, or ARP, or Tommy Oberheim, or Dave Smith, Sequential Circuits, could come to NAMM and score big this time and have, a lot of hullabaloo and sell a lot of it, whatever a lot was. There were 13,000 mini Moogs sold. Some people think there were 400,000. It had this mind share that was impossible. There were 13,000 sold. That's all over all those years. Anyhow, you could come and do that and have a momentary triumph, but the fact that you were undercapitalized was your death knell. The Gulf Plus Westerns, the Yamahas, the Rolands, which was really a consortium in a way. How could Roland bring this many instruments to market? Well, they had people all over Japan bringing Mr. Kakahashi instruments, and then he'd put the Roland imprimatur on them. There it goes. You see this in other outcroppings nowadays. Native instruments. I can't for the life of me believe that the same team did Absinthe that did Reactor. They're both virtual synthesizers. They didn't come out of the same mind. No way. So this was about naivete on everybody's part, in my view. And that's why when the consultant came in from Chicago, he said, don't worry about ARP. They're not our competition. And he was right. I didn't understand. Well, yeah, but aren't we have these ads and they do them and we do them and we're competing. And no, he looked at their Dun and Bradstreet and realized they're going to be out of business in a few months or 6 months or whenever.
When was this?
Well, about when they went out of business, which I don't remember. There was an article in Inc. magazine, INC, not very complimentary, I must say, about how they sort of shot themselves in the foot with the guitar synthesizer development, overextended themselves. It was a dog in the marketplace. It didn't track all that well, and there's technical reasons it didn't. And they didn't realize guitar players don't want to play clean so they can play a synthesizer. Not enough to make it a viable product. And we still suffer from the keyboard mentality today. MIDI, the first version of MIDI, it's still this way in 2008 here, is edge-oriented. Note on, note off. Well, tell a tenor saxophone player, turn a note on, by the way. I'll be back to you and turn it off in a minute. It's not the way you play those instruments. So the fact that you play a guitar in a more immediate and personal way didn't lend itself to the switch-like note on, note off of keyboards and MIDI grew with keyboards. It certainly doesn't fit wind synthesizers, with their continuous expression. Now, can you do stuff with MIDI in that context? Yes, for the same reason that musicians have always been able to do things like hold an instrument with four pieces of catgut on it and take horsehair on a stick and hold your hand backwards and rub it this way and make exquisite music. Musicians have always been circus performers, and we've done marvelous things with this kind of low value protocol called MIDI. So that's another story, as they say.
Yeah. Tell me about Dave Luce and golf.
Dave Luce and golf. Dave Luce was president of the Moog Electronics company. He had been an engineer at Moog Music and had done Polymoog and a number of things. And an interesting man. And one afternoon I was working there and he said, let's go play golf. I said, no, I don't play. Well, you ought to learn. I said, Dave, I play games where I hit the ball and other people chase after, but I don't play games where I hit the ball and I have to chase after, the usual nonsense. Oh, well, come on. What's wrong? Are you afraid to? I said, I don't have any clubs. I have an extra set of clubs. I don't know how to play. I'll show you. A little bit of a lie. I had hit golf balls as a child when we lived in Chattanooga, and I made a little money hawking golf balls, finding them, and selling them and doing a little caddying. Still had caddying back in that era. So lo and behold, we went and played golf, me and my street shoes and, the whole bit. And he showed me, said, do it, turn it more this way, okay, hit it. Within that round, I was hitting the ball like a champ. A long way, first of all. And I didn't even use woods. I had a 3-iron. I teed off with a 3-iron. I could hit it about 250 yards, which for anybody is a long way, especially with those clubs, those older clubs. And naturally, as soon as I realized, hey, I can do this pretty well, I had to do it. So it's almost like a drug, it's feedback. We know about it. It's positive feedback. It's like, well, you feel pretty good about yourself, Anyhow, I broke 100 on the 12th game I ever played. And he made note of it. He said, he was like incredulous. He said, you broke 100. It wasn't a wimp course. It was a big course. You broke 100. I said, so what? What was it? He says, 94. I said, my God, Dave, par is 72. That's no good. And he looked at me and he says, you jackass. He says, 80% of the people that play this game never break 100, which I think is true. Maybe even higher. It's a hard game. And there's a lot of players, a lot of amateurs. So I broke 90 that year, and the next year I broke 80. So needless to say, I was hooked, and I do love the game now. It's like, it's very Zen-like. There's only you, the club, and the golf ball. There's the course. There's no component to blame anything on, nobody beat me. It's very much about your own emotional control, the idea that you can accept these crazy things. You got a great round going, and then all of a sudden you hooked one over into the pond. There's the round, it's gone. It's a much more difficult game in some ways than baseball. You can stand up at the plate with baseball and screw up 2 out of 3 times to be the American League batting champion. And they don't care where you hit it. Just hit it where somebody isn't if you can.